You beat me to the punch. Oh.
Welcome to my channel. Please hit like, share, and subscribe. This is part 2 of Mary Wells, the first Motown superstar. About 8 months after marrying Herman Griffin, the real trouble began. Wells and Griffin were invited to a party that all their recording business friends were invited to. Wells didn't go, but Griffin did, and her friends later told her that Griffin had had sex with a prostitute at the party. Mary was hurt, sad, embarrassed, and angry. Griffin tried to keep the marriage going, but was unable to soothe his young bride. Wells would not sleep with him anymore, and she replaced Griffin as her band leader with another Motown staff musician, and spent more time out of town touring. Meanwhile, Griffin was regretting his extramarital fling. On May of 1963, Mary wound up divorcing Griffin. In later years, Mary was always cordial when talking about Griffin. In 1991, she told friends that Griffin didn't do very well at Motown because they were wrapped up in her career and neglected his. In September 1961, Gordy put out a third Mary Wells record, the blues-style ballad Strange Love, backed with Come to Me, written and produced by Mickey Stevenson. It fell flat and didn't make the charts. Due to this, Gordy had Mary work with Smokey Robinson, who wrote and produced The One Who Really Loves You, which was a hit and was followed up by You Beat Me to the Punch. You Beat Me to the Punch became a #1 Billboard R&B hit and reached #9 on the Billboard and Cashbox charts. This record made Mary Wells a major crossover star. Two Lovers, released in October 1962 and backed with Operator, was Mary's second consecutive #1 Billboard R&B hit. In fact, 1962 was a good year for Mary. In that 1 year, 3 of her records have risen into Billboard's and Cashbox Pop Charts Top 10, a rare achievement. Two Lovers remained a hit in 1963 when Billboard voted it number 81 among the top 100 songs of the year. On the first Motown review tour, Wells spent a lot of time talking to David Ruffin, who would soon be named the new lead singer for The Temptations. Rumors flew about an alleged affair between the two. Wells later insisted that although Ruffin lavished consoling words on her about her problems with Herman, nothing happened between them because at the time she was still married to Griffin. Even though the other artists would get together in the hotel lobby after the show to socialize and often to pair off, she reverted to her default mode when unattached and off stage. She skipped the socializing and stayed alone in her room. After divorcing Griffin, however, Wells lightened up and had an affair with Ruffin that lasted for about 6 months. She said, "He fell in love with me and wanted to marry me, but I was too much into my career." That didn't prevent her from fuming over Ruffin's lady-killing prowess. David was a good-looking guy, she said in early 1991, shortly before Ruffin's death. The girls would be hanging all over him. I would be backstage watching him, and I would get jealous. Then he would get jealous when I went on stage, so I said, this is not going to work. Soon after, she broke up with David. After breaking up with David, Mary started seeing Brian Holland of Holland Doja Holland. By the way, Brian Holland will not comment on any relationship they may or may not have had, but noted Mary liked me as a person more than the others. Wells saw Holland, who was already married, not only as a great songwriter, but as a real nice guy, very deep and very educated. She said she was impressed that he had earned good grades at school and that he had been struggling to write hit songs since before she had sung her first composition for Gordy. She said she tried to inspire Holland by working really hard on the songs he gave her. According to Mary, Holland also proposed to her, and as an additional demonstration of his love, organized her 21st birthday celebration at Motown. Holland said he wasn't in charge of the party, although it is possible that his sister Carol Holland was. He has also said that he never proposed to Mary, stating that he was married during that time. When asked why Mary would say something like this, he stated, "You can't tell us what is going on in a woman's mind." Mary had a number of intimate relationships and engagements. In the process of removing herself from Holland's grasp, she had a brief affair with a man named Benny Mullins. After dating for about 2 or 3 months, they got engaged and even went so far as to leak their wedding plans to the press, namely Jet Magazine. The Reverend C.L. Franklin, father of singer Aretha Franklin, was going to preside at the July 31st, 1965 ceremony at the New Bethel Baptist Church in Detroit. Then something happened. Mary's friend May has stated, "He did something. He had too many women and something came up, like another girlfriend." Wells, uninterested in taking on another faithless husband, canceled the wedding plans. In truth, Mary was anything but a snob in her choice of boyfriends or husbands. She wanted someone who would take care of her. His social or industry status didn't matter. Meanwhile, her already high status at Motown was about to go even higher as she rose to her peak. As a result of the hit Smokey Robinson, and to a lesser extent HDH wrote and produced for her, Mary had become a Motown goddess, its premier female vocalist, a position she would hold without challenge from 1962 to 1964. Her fans, many of them young, reacted with frenzy to Mary's new fame. We would literally have to hide her to get her from the car to where she was performing because the children would tear her apart, Motown singer Mabel John has said. Brenda Holloway said that at the height of Mary's fame in the early 1960s, everybody at Motown thought she was untouchable because she was the one with all the hits. Everything she touched turned to gold. She was Miss Motown. Singing backup for Mary on "You Lost the Sweetest Boy" were members of the Temptations and the Supremes, who went on to do the background singing on other Wells tunes as well. And on one occasion, the Temptations were sent from a club in Brooklyn where they were performing solo over to the Apollo in Manhattan to provide backup for one of Mary's performances. Smokey Robinson and Wells, sensing they were on a roll, marshaled their best talents for maximum effort. Robinson wrote the music and lyrics for Mary's next song, "My God," released on March 13, 1964. "My God" rose to #1 on the Billboard and Cashbox charts. Wells' first time at the very top of both of those charts. It remained among the top 40 hits on the Billboard charts for 13 weeks. Billboard ranked it at number 17 among the top 100 songs of 1964. Among the top 1,000 most popular single records released from 1955 through 1996, Billboard ranked it at number 437. The success of "My God" had other pleasant consequences for Wells. After the song was released, she was paired with Marvin Gaye, becoming the first of several female Motown vocalists to become one of his duet partners. Motown paired the two not only because her voice blended well with his, but because of her sexy persona, which they hoped would increase Marvin's personal appeal. They also thought that linking the struggling Gaye to a star like Wells would boost his career. They were right on both counts. Mary was now a huge success. She was far and away Motown's biggest star. Various members of the Supremes, who spent their time hanging around Motown lobbies waiting for unpaid or low-paid jobs as hand clappers or background singers, remember seeing Wells and her entourage sweep majestically past them. Author Tony Turner noted the loftiness of Mary's stature at the time. She was the top star in that period at Motown. She didn't compete with the other groups. She was removed from that. She had hits. She was Mary Wells. Eventually, Mary complained to Motown executives about the lack of cold hard cash. On May 13, 1964, when My Guy was riding high in the Billboard Top 40, Motown threw Wells a fabulous 21st birthday party attended by all the Motown big shots. The highlight of the party came when Gordy presented Wells, the company's biggest star, with the mink stole. Just 1 week before the party, Wells had recorded the ironically titled tune When I'm Done in Motown's studio. No one of any prominence at the company knew that its top solo vocalist, her ego ballooning as a result of her international superstardom, and her resentment growing at what she saw as underpayment and underappreciation, had decided to leave. Sometime after the party, Mickey Stevenson told Gordy he had heard that Griffin was telling Wells and others that she was being treated badly at Motown. Gordy immediately telephoned Wells and asked her to meet with him in his office. She asked Gordy to come to her home, apartment 401 at 3320 West Chicago Boulevard, and he dutifully went over there. The building has since been demolished. After some small talk, Gordy asked Wells if she was unhappy about anything. He had a lot of stake. The 3-year contract Mary had signed in July 1960 already had been unilaterally extended by Gordy, as was his right under its terms for another 3 years. But under Michigan law, because Mary had been a minor when she signed the original contract, she had the right to disaffirm it when she turned 21. According to Gordy's autobiography, To Be Loved, after he asked his question, Wells looked at him as if she felt sorry for him. Understandably, he thought this was a bad sign. Then she told him she wanted him to talk to her lawyer, a New York attorney named Lewis Harris, who would visit him at his office the next day. Gordy thought this was an even worse sign. Wells' account of the meeting, as told to Steve Berkman, is that Gordy came to her apartment and talked to her about why she didn't want to come back to the company. She said she told him, "I enjoy singing, but I could go to church and sing for free." The atmosphere became highly emotional, according to Wells. Gordy practically got on his knees and begged her not to leave. "What I had done was turn the pain loose, and I threw it back on him," she said, "and the pain must have been really agony for him. When you're young, you don't realize these things. I probably wouldn't have left if I knew he was in that much pain." Gordy probably was in pain as he left Mary's apartment, but all he told her on his way out was, "Think about staying with the company." Attorney Harris arrived at Gordy's office the next day, June 17th, and told him that Wells, now 21, for more than 1 month wanted to disaffirm her contract with Motown. When Gordy asked him why, Harris said Wells could get a better deal with another company. In his book, Gordy says that he then told Harris, "There's more value here than meets the eye, and money is only part of it." He then took Harris on a tour of Motown's writers and producers' rooms, the studio, the management operation, the promotion and sales departments, and the artist development training department. Even before the tour was over, Harris was full of praise, Gordy wrote. "Mr. Gordy," he said, "I've never seen a company that does so much for any artist." He was convinced there was no place in the world for Mary but Motown, and assured Berry he was going to tell her just that. Whether Harris knew that everything he saw was supported in part by revenues from Mary's records, or realized just how big her contributions were, isn't known. Gordy hasn't said whether he explained such details to Harris. Harris later said that he thought Mary's contract had expired. Gordy presented Harris with a brand new contract for Wells to sign. Its terms are unknown. Harris said he would tell Wells that Motown was the best place for her and that she ought to sign the new contract and stay with the company. Gordy's offer and her attorney's endorsement of it were far from what Wells was expecting. She fired Harris immediately and hired a Detroit lawyer, Herbert Aegis. Aegis came out of his corner fighting. His first move was to present Gordy on July 12th with notification from Wells, this time in writing, that she was disaffirming her Motown contract. Gordy was quoted as being surprised and hurt when he learned that Wells was apparently receptive to offers from other record companies. "We loved her," he told author David Ritz. "Everyone at the company had a great relationship with Mary." Aegis filed suit in Wayne County Circuit Court on September 4, 1964, demanding Wells be freed from her Motown contract because she'd been under 21 when she had signed it and now wished to exercise her right to extricate herself. The legal arguments in the resulting court case revolved around somewhat narrow issues. One was whether Wells had given up her right to leave at that point by continuing to work for Motown for a few weeks past her 21st birthday. That had worked for another recording company on at least one previous occasion. Court pleadings in Mary's case also dealt with the question of whether the $300,000 Motown said it had invested in training and promoting Wells would be unfairly lost by the company if she were allowed to leave. Apparently, Wayne County Circuit Court Judge John Wise thought that Motown's positions on both arguments were weak. On October 5, 1964, exactly 31 days after the case had been filed, and while Wells was touring with the Beatles in England, he ruled Wells' contract null and void as of that date. As a result of a general statement approved by the court, Wells gave up the right to re-record any of her Motown songs for other companies for 5 years. And 20th Century Fox Records, which turned out to have been negotiating with Wells since July of 1964, agreed to pay a percentage of Wells' 20th Century royalties to Motown for 3 years. Most seriously, Wells gave up all future royalties on the records she already had made for Motown in return for a payment of $30,000 from that company. Wells said she regretted this part of the settlement for the rest of her life.